You didn't stumble here by accident. Think about how many things had to align perfectly for this moment to happen. The device in your hands, the sound reaching your ears right now, the specific sequence of thoughts that led you here. Billions of people are online right now, and yet here you are listening to this. Not someone else. You. There are people who will scroll past this video. People who will hear the first few seconds and move on, pulled back into the noise, back into the comfortable numbness of distraction. And that's okay, this isn't for them. Not yet, but you're still here, still listening, and that means something. Because there's a version of you that almost didn't find this. A version that took a slightly different route through the day, made a different choice at breakfast, picked up their phone 30 seconds later or 30 seconds earlier, and missed this entirely. But that's not the version of you that's here right now. The version of you that's here chose, on some level you might not fully understand yet, to stop, to pay attention, to listen. That choice matters more than you know. Let's start with something simple, something so obvious that most people never think about it. You are aware right now. Not just alive, aware. There is something happening inside you that is witnessing this moment. You can feel the weight of your own attention as these words land in your ears. You know that you are listening. You know that you exist. And if you sit with that for just a moment, not the content of your thoughts, not the things you're worried about or planning or remembering, but the pure fact that you are aware at all, something strange and wonderful begins to happen. You start to realize that this awareness, this quality of knowing that you exist, has never changed. Your body has changed. Your beliefs have changed. Your relationships, your circumstances, your understanding of the world, all of it has shifted and morphed and transformed over the years. But the awareness itself, the thing that is watching all of that happen, that has remained constant, steady, unshaken. You were aware at 5 years old, aware at 15, aware through your worst moments and your best ones, and you are aware right now, in this moment, hearing these words. What is that? What is the thing that remains when everything else changes? That is the question that changes everything. And the fact that you're still listening, the fact that it even resonates with you, is not random. It's a sign that you are ready to go deeper than most people are willing to go. Here is something the world doesn't teach you. Most of us spend our entire lives on the surface. We learn how to function, how to perform, how to fit into systems that were built before we were born. We're taught what to think far more than we're taught how to think. We're shown what success looks like, what happiness is supposed to feel like, what a life well lived is supposed to resemble. And for a while, we follow those blueprints. But then something happens. Maybe it's a loss. Maybe it's a moment of unexpected beauty, a sunset that makes you ache in a way you can't explain, a piece of music that seems to speak directly to something wordless inside you. Maybe it's a relationship ending, or a new one beginning, or a quiet Tuesday afternoon where you're sitting alone and something inside you whispers, "This isn't it. There's more to this." And once you hear that whisper, you can never fully unhear it. That whisper is why you're here right now, listening to these words. That whisper has been with you for longer than you might realize. It's the part of you that never quite believed the story you were told about who you are and what this life is. The part of you that suspects, no, that knows on some level, that existence is stranger and more beautiful and more expansive than anyone ever told you. You are not a random biological accident drifting through an indifferent universe. You are not your job title, or your bank account, or your history, or your fears. You are not the collection of other people's opinions that you've been carrying around as if they were facts. You are something far more interesting than any of that. Consciousness is the great mystery at the center of everything. Scientists can map the brain with extraordinary precision. They can trace the pathways of neurons, measure electrical activity, identify which regions light up when you feel joy or fear or love. But there is one thing they cannot explain. There is one thing that every honest scientist, every thoughtful philosopher, every person who has ever sat quietly with themselves long enough to really look, will tell you remains genuinely mysterious. Why is there experience at all? Not how the brain processes information, that we can study, but why does processing information feel like anything? Why is there a sense of what it is like to be you? Why isn't the universe just unconscious machinery running its programs in the dark? This is called the hard problem of consciousness, and it is not a fringe question. It is one of the most serious, deeply considered questions in all of science and philosophy, and the honest answer is, nobody knows. What we do know is that consciousness, awareness, experience, the sense of being here is real. It is, arguably, the only thing you can be completely certain is real. Everything else you know about the world comes through your awareness, but the awareness itself is undeniable. Descartes put it simply, I think, therefore I am, but it goes even deeper than thinking. Even if you stopped thinking entirely, even if the mind went completely quiet, there would still be awareness, still be presence, still be something that knows the silence. That something is what you truly are. And here is where it gets extraordinary. Every tradition that has ever explored the depths of human experience, every mystical lineage, every contemplative practice, every wisdom school across every culture in every era of human history, has arrived at a remarkably similar conclusion. They used different words, different symbols, different rituals, different frameworks. The Hindu sages spoke of Brahman, the infinite consciousness that underlies all of reality, temporarily experiencing itself through countless individual forms. The Sufis described the soul as a drop of the ocean that has forgotten it is the ocean. Christian mystics wrote about the union of the individual soul with the divine ground of being. Buddhist teachers pointed to the nature of mind, awareness itself, empty yet luminous, the ground from which all experience arises. Modern quantum physics, from a completely different direction, has arrived at something strangely similar. The observer cannot be separated from the observed. At the deepest levels of reality, matter and energy behave differently depending on whether they are being measured, as if existence itself is somehow responsive to awareness. The universe is not a collection of solid objects moving through empty space. It is a web of relationships, of probabilities, of fields of potential that collapse into specific experiences when consciousness interacts with them. Different languages, the same territory. And you are not separate from that territory. You are not a small, isolated consciousness looking at the universe from the outside. You are the universe becoming conscious of itself. You are the cosmos looking at its own reflection and asking, what am I? That is what you are doing right now as you listen, and it is one of the most profound things a being can do. Let's talk about the life you've been living. Not to judge it, not to say it has been wrong, because nothing about your path has been wasted. Every experience, including the painful ones, especially the painful ones, has been teaching you something essential. Every relationship that broke your heart, every moment you felt lost or afraid or like you were failing, every time the world didn't match the picture you had in your mind, all of it has been shaping something. But here's the question worth sitting with as you hear these words. How much of your life has been genuinely chosen, and how much has been inherited? The beliefs you carry about who you are, where did they come from? Your sense of what you deserve, what's possible for you, what you're capable of, were those things you discovered for yourself? Or were they handed to you by people who were themselves carrying inherited beliefs from people before them? The fears that hold you back, are they yours? Or did you absorb them from the world around you, from people who were afraid and passed their fear down like a family heirloom without even realizing they were doing it? Most of us are walking through life running software that was installed in us before we were old enough to consent to the installation. The programs are so familiar, so deeply integrated, that we mistake them for our own thinking. We believe we are choosing when we are reacting. We believe we are living when we are performing. The awakening that is available to you, the shift that you came here to experience, begins with seeing this. Not with judgment, not with self-criticism, simply with clear, honest seeing. You have been asleep in a very specific way, and right now, listening to these words, you are waking up. What does it mean to wake up? It does not mean becoming someone else. It does not mean abandoning your life, rejecting your relationships, moving to a mountain and meditating until you float away into the cosmos. Real awakening is not an escape from life. It is a more complete, more honest, more fully inhabited version of it. To wake up means to start making choices from your center rather than from your conditioning. It means beginning to notice, maybe for the first time, the space between stimulus and response, the gap between something happening and your reaction to it. Because in that gap lives something extraordinary: freedom. The freedom to choose who you want to be in this moment, regardless of who you have been in all the moments before. To wake up means recognizing that your attention is not something that happens to you. It is something you direct. And wherever you direct your attention, you are feeding something, strengthening something, making something more real in your experience. When you spend your attention on fear, you grow fear. When you spend it on resentment, you grow resentment. When you spend it on gratitude, on curiosity, on love, on possibility, you grow those things. Not as magical thinking, but as the simple, observable reality of how human consciousness works. What you practice, you become. What you rehearse internally, you eventually perform externally. This is not New Age fantasy. This is neuroscience. The brain changes in response to what you repeatedly think and feel and do. Neural pathways strengthen with use and weaken without it. The person you are today is the result of the thoughts you've been thinking most consistently. And the person you become tomorrow will be shaped by the thoughts you choose to think starting now. You are not fixed. You are not finished. You are not the person your history says you are. You are whoever you decide to become. And that decision is available to you in every single moment. There's something happening on a collective level that most people can feel, but struggle to put into words. The world feels different than it used to. Not just politically, not just technologically, something more fundamental than that. There is a quality to this time that feels unprecedented. A sense of acceleration. A sense that everything is being questioned simultaneously. The old certainties are dissolving. The frameworks that held society together, the institutions, the narratives, the shared agreements about what is real and what matters and who we are, all of it is under pressure. For people who are still deeply identified with those frameworks, this feels terrifying. Like everything is falling apart. But for people who are awake enough to see from a wider perspective, it looks different. It looks like a species in the middle of a transformation. Like humanity going through exactly the kind of collapse-and-renewal cycle that precedes every significant leap forward. Not the end of something, the birth of something new. You can feel this, can't you? The sense that you are living at a hinge point in history. That the choices being made now, individually and collectively, are going to matter in ways that are hard to overstate. That something is being decided about what kind of future is possible. That feeling is accurate. And people like you, people who are awake enough to ask these questions, who are willing to look inward rather than just outward, who understand that the outer world is in many ways a reflection of the inner world. People like you are part of what decides which direction the hinge swings. This is not flattery. This is responsibility. The work you do on yourself is not separate from the work the world needs done. The fears you face, the patterns you break, the love you choose when fear would be easier, all of that ripples outward in ways you will never fully see, but that are nonetheless real. You matter. What you do with your consciousness matters. Not because you are special in a way that sets you above others, but because every person who raises the quality of their awareness, who lives with more integrity and presence and love, makes it more possible for those around them to do the same. Consciousness is contagious. Courage is contagious. Wake up, and you help others wake up just by being in the world. Let's go deeper now into the nature of reality itself. Not just the surface story, but the stranger, more honest, more wondrous truth underneath. You experience yourself as a solid object moving through a world of other solid objects. But this is a useful simplification that your senses provide, not a literal description of what's actually happening. At the atomic level, the matter that makes up your body is almost entirely empty space. The particles that form your atoms are themselves more like concentrated fields of energy than like tiny solid objects. The boundary between your body and the air around you, at the quantum level, is far less clear and definite than it appears. The light entering your eyes is converted into electrical signals that your brain then interprets and constructs into the seamless, full-color, three-dimensional experience of a world that you believe you are seeing directly. But you are not. You are experiencing your brain's model of the world. You are living inside a representation. The map, not the territory. This doesn't make the world less real. It makes it more mysterious. It means that the reality you experience is, in a profound and genuine sense, co-created by your consciousness. The world as you know it is shaped by the lenses through which you perceive it, your expectations, your beliefs, your emotional states, your history. Two people can live through identical circumstances and have completely different experiences of them, not because one is right and one is wrong, but because their inner lenses are different. Their constructed realities, while overlapping enough to communicate and cooperate, are genuinely different experiences. This means that changing your inner world is not separate from changing your outer experience of reality. It is the most direct path to it. When mystics and sages throughout history have spoken about the power of inner transformation to change your experience of life, this is not wishful thinking. This is a description of how consciousness actually works. Change the lens, and the picture changes. Not because the external world has necessarily changed, but because the reality you inhabit, the one built from your perception, genuinely has. Here is one of the most important things you can understand about why your life has looked the way it has. You have been operating largely from your subconscious programming. The conscious mind, the part of you that is hearing these words right now and processing these thoughts, is only a tiny fraction of the total activity of your mind. Beneath it, running constantly and largely outside your awareness, is an enormous system of automatic patterns. Beliefs formed in early childhood that you have never questioned. Emotional responses to situations that feel spontaneous but are actually deeply habitual. Ways of relating to people that mirror how you saw people relate to each other before you were old enough to have an opinion about it. This subconscious system is not your enemy. It is, in fact, trying to protect you. It developed these patterns because at some point they seemed necessary for survival or belonging or safety. The problem is that the patterns often got locked in place at a stage of development that you have long since outgrown. You are carrying the survival strategies of a 5-year-old, a 13-year-old, a 20-year-old who was hurt in ways they didn't know how to process, and those strategies are now running your adult life in ways that don't serve you. The relationship patterns that keep repeating, the self-sabotage that shows up right when things are going well, the way certain situations trigger reactions that feel completely out of proportion, the persistent voice that tells you you're not good enough, not ready, not worthy. That voice did not arise from nowhere. It was installed by experiences, by people, by a world that was often doing its best, but was itself carrying its own unexamined wounds. And the extraordinary thing is that you can update this programming, not overnight, not without effort and discomfort and genuine inner work, but you can. The plasticity of the human brain, the capacity of the human psyche for genuine transformation, these are among the most hopeful things known about human beings. You are not condemned to be who you have been. Every pattern that was learned can be unlearned. Every belief that was installed can be examined, questioned, and replaced. Every wound can be worked with, not erased, because it is part of your story, but integrated, metabolized, transformed into something that gives you depth and compassion rather than something that controls you from the shadows. This is the work, and it is the most important work you will ever do. The concept of vibration, that everything, including your thoughts and emotions, has a frequency, is something you will encounter in many spiritual teachings. And while the language is sometimes imprecise, the underlying insight is sound. Your emotional states are not just feelings. They are physiological events with measurable signatures. Fear, for instance, triggers specific hormonal responses, specific patterns of muscle tension, specific changes in breathing and heart rate. It quite literally changes how your body functions. And it changes how you perceive the world. Fear focuses attention on threat, makes ambiguous situations seem dangerous, colors your interpretation of other people's intentions. Love does the opposite. Gratitude, joy, genuine connection, these states open perception rather than narrow it. They make you more creative, more able to find solutions, more able to see the good in others and in situations. So when teachers speak of raising your vibration, they are pointing at something real, cultivating inner states that expand rather than contract your capacity to experience life. States that make you more available to possibility, more able to access your own wisdom, more capable of connection. And the beautiful, practical thing about this is that you can work with it deliberately. You cannot always control what happens in your life. You cannot always control your initial emotional reactions. But you can, with practice, learn to shift your internal state. Through breathing, because the breath is the bridge between the conscious and unconscious mind, and changing the breath changes the nervous system faster than almost anything else. Through movement, through intentionally directing your attention toward what is genuinely good in your life rather than what is threatening. Through connection with others. Through time and nature. Through creative expression. These are not luxuries. They are essential practices for a human being who wants to live consciously rather than reactively. They are the maintenance of the most important instrument you have. Let's talk about the relationships in your life, because this is often where the deepest work happens and where the deepest resistance shows up. The people who are hardest to be around are often your greatest teachers. Not because the universe is punishing you by placing difficult people in your path, but because the places where we feel most triggered, most reactive, most unable to find our peace. Those are precisely the places where our own unhealed material lives. The person who makes you feel unseen is showing you somewhere inside yourself that feels unseen. The person who triggers your sense of unworthiness is touching a wound that was there before they arrived. The person whose anger makes you want to disappear was not the first person whose anger made you feel that way. This is not to excuse harmful behavior from others. Boundaries are real, and protecting yourself from genuinely harmful relationships is not spiritual weakness. It is basic self-respect and necessary wisdom. You can recognize that someone is activating your wounds without deciding to stay in proximity to a person who keeps cutting you open. But the recognition is important, because as long as you believe that your emotional responses are entirely caused by what other people do, you remain a victim of circumstance. You remain reactive rather than responsive. You remain at the mercy of whoever happens to push your buttons on any given day. When you take ownership, not blame, but ownership of your inner responses, everything changes. You become the author rather than the character. You discover that you have more choice than you thought, and you stop needing the external world to be different before you can feel okay. The people who have the most freedom in life are not those who have arranged perfect circumstances. They are those who have developed enough inner spaciousness to find their footing regardless of circumstances. They are not unaffected by life. They feel everything. But they are not swept away. They have learned to be in the storm without becoming the storm. That is a capacity you can develop. It begins with exactly what you are doing right now, turning your attention inward as you listen, asking genuine questions about your own inner landscape, being willing to see yourself honestly, with neither the false modesty that diminishes you nor the defensive self-protection that refuses to grow. There is something important to hear about time. You live as though the past and the future are more real than the present. You spend enormous amounts of energy rehearsing conversations that haven't happened yet, replaying conversations that happened years ago, worrying about futures that may never arrive, regretting paths not taken in a past that can no longer be changed. Meanwhile, the only moment that is actually happening, this one, right now, as you listen, gets a fraction of your attention. This is one of the most significant sources of human suffering, and one of the least examined. The past is real in the sense that events occurred, but the past as you experience it right now is a reconstruction, a story your mind tells, colored by your current beliefs and emotional states. You don't have perfect access to what happened. You have your interpretation of it, filtered through who you were at the time and who you have become since. And that interpretation can change. People who do genuine healing work often describe the experience of the past itself seeming to shift, not because the events changed, but because their relationship to those events changed. The story changed. The meaning changed. And because we live in the meaning of our experiences rather than in the raw events themselves, the past, in the most practical sense, does change. And the future does not exist yet. Every moment you spend catastrophizing about a future that hasn't happened is a moment spent suffering over nothing real. This doesn't mean you shouldn't plan, shouldn't prepare, shouldn't take the future seriously. But planning from a place of clarity and presence is very different from anxiously projecting worst-case scenarios from a place of fear. The present moment is the only place where life is actually happening. It is the only place where you can make choices. It is the only place where love is real, where connection is real, where meaning is real. And here is the extraordinary thing. The present moment is always available. No matter how deep into your thoughts you have wandered, no matter how far into the past or future your mind has traveled, one breath, one conscious act of attention, and you are back. Right here, right now, this is always available, always free, always sufficient. This moment, the one in which you are hearing these words, is enough. Not because everything is perfect, but because this is where you are. And where you are is where life is. There will be people in your life who don't understand this journey you're on. People who find the questions you're asking uncomfortable, who prefer you to remain in the role they've assigned you, who interpret your growth as a criticism of their own choices, your becoming as an implicit judgment of their staying. This is one of the more painful parts of waking up, and it's worth preparing for, not to create separation, but to navigate it with as much grace and compassion as possible. You cannot bring everyone with you. You can be a loving, patient, humble presence that demonstrates through your way of being rather than your words that this path leads somewhere real. But ultimately, every person is on their own timeline. Every soul is in its own process. And trying to force an awakening in someone who isn't ready is not kindness, it's interference. What you can do is remain genuinely connected even across difference. Remain curious about others rather than convinced you have found the truth they need. Remember that the most eloquent argument for this way of living is not what you say about it, but who you become in the living of it. A person who is truly growing becomes more patient, not less. More loving, not more superior. More humble, not more certain. The light you carry doesn't need to announce itself. It simply shines, and people notice, and some of them will be drawn to ask what's different about you. And that is your invitation. Let's speak for a moment about the things you are carrying that do not belong to you. Grief that was never processed by the people before you. Shame that belonged to someone else's wound and got handed down without a label. Fear of scarcity that made sense in your grandparents' generation and has been passed through the bloodline ever since. Patterns of relating, to love, to power, to safety, that were forged in circumstances far removed from your own life. This is what researchers in epigenetics and trauma are beginning to map, that the experiences of our ancestors leave marks not just on our psychology, but on our biology. The body keeps the score not just of our own experiences, but of the experiences of those who came before us. You are carrying more than just your own story. This is not meant to be overwhelming. It is meant to be clarifying. Because some of the pain you have felt, some of the patterns that have seemed so persistent despite your best efforts, some of the fears that feel somehow larger than your own life, they may literally be larger than your own life. They may be part of a lineage you are being called to heal. And here is the extraordinary thing. When you do this work, when you face what has been handed down to you, and, through your willingness to see it and feel it and choose not to pass it on, you transform it. You heal forward and backward simultaneously. Your healing changes what is possible for those who come after you. You are not just healing yourself, you are healing your line. This is sacred work. It is also deeply practical. It is the work of refusing to pass on what was passed to you. The work of being the one in your family, in your community, in your era, who chooses differently, who breaks the pattern, who says, "This stops with me," not with bitterness, not with blame, but with love and with the clear, simple resolution to do better because you have seen further. As we move toward the end of our time together, I want to speak to the part of you that is afraid. Not to dismiss the fear, not to tell you that everything will be fine in a breezy, unconvincing way, but to sit with it honestly, right here, in this moment as you listen. The fear is real. The uncertainty is real. The sense that you are being called toward something that requires you to leave behind the familiar, the identities, the stories, the ways of being that have felt safe even when they have been limiting, that discomfort is real. Growth is not comfortable. Genuine transformation, the kind that actually changes the trajectory of your life, requires you to be willing to be uncertain, to not know, to release the need to have it all figured out before you take the next step. The caterpillar does not know it is becoming a butterfly. The chrysalis stage looks, from the outside, like stillness. But inside, the caterpillar has completely dissolved. Its body has essentially liquefied. It has let go of everything that it was in order to become what it is becoming. There is a stage in the transformation where, if you open the chrysalis, you would not find a caterpillar or a butterfly. You would find something in between, something that doesn't yet know what it is. That in-between place, that is often where you are when you feel most lost. Not failing, transforming, not broken, dissolving into something larger. The courage this requires is not the dramatic, cinematic kind. It is the quiet, daily, stubborn courage of continuing to show up for your own becoming, of choosing again and again to be honest rather than comfortable, to grow rather than merely endure, to stay open rather than close down. That courage is already in you. It brought you to this video today. It has carried you through every difficult thing you have faced, and it is more than enough for what comes next. In the next chapter of your life, which begins, in a very real sense, the moment this video ends, there are a few things that will make the difference between genuine transformation and simply thinking about transformation. The first is practice. Insight is not enough. Understanding intellectually that your thoughts shape your experience is not enough. The shift from the life you have been living to the life you are capable of living happens through practice. Daily, consistent, humble practice. Meditation or prayer or quiet reflection, the practice of turning your attention inward and learning to know your own mind. Journaling, the practice of making the unconscious conscious through the act of honest expression. Movement that reconnects you to your body, because awakening is not only a mental event, it is a full-body recalibration. And the practice of genuine presence, of bringing real attention to what is actually here, in each moment, rather than drifting perpetually into the theater of past and future. The second is community. You cannot do this alone, not because you aren't strong enough, but because we are not designed for isolation. We are social creatures whose nervous systems regulate through connection. The people around you either support your growth or make it harder. This doesn't mean cutting people out ruthlessly, but it does mean seeking out and investing in relationships where genuine depth is possible, where you can be honest, where your becoming is welcomed rather than threatening. The third is patience. The person you are becoming is not someone you can rush. You can accelerate the process by engaging with it fully and honestly. But transformation has its own timing, and fighting that timing creates more suffering than it resolves. Trust the process even when you can't see the progress, especially then. And the fourth, perhaps the most important, is love. For yourself first. Not the performance of self-love, not the surface-level affirmations, the actual, difficult, ongoing practice of treating yourself with the same compassion you would offer a dear friend, of speaking to yourself with kindness, of caring for your body and your mind and your spirit with genuine tenderness. Because from that well-resourced, genuinely loved place, love flows outward naturally. You cannot pour from empty. Fill yourself, and the overflow blesses everyone around you. You have traveled a long way in this hour together. Not in distance, in depth. You came to this video as one version of yourself, and something, even something small, even just a question that wasn't there before, a feeling that has quietly shifted, has changed. That matters. Do not dismiss it. Do not let the noise of ordinary life rush back in and bury what stirred in you here. When this video ends, sit with the silence for a moment before you reach for the next thing. Give what you have heard room to breathe. Let it settle into you. Stay with the questions rather than rushing to answers. The questions themselves are transformative. A mind that is genuinely asking begins to see differently. And a person who sees differently begins to choose differently. And a person who chooses differently begins to live differently. That is how it works. That is how it has always worked. You are not at the beginning of this journey. You have been on it far longer than you might realize. Every experience that broke your heart open, every moment of genuine beauty that stopped you in your tracks, every period of your life when you were forced to let go of who you thought you were, all of it has been the journey. All of it has been preparing you for this deepening, for this willingness to go further in. And you are ready. You have always been ready. The readiness was never about having it all figured out. It was about being willing to listen. And here you are, listening. The reality that awaits you on the other side of this deepening is not some other life in some other place. It is this life, this very one, heard with clearer ears, felt with a more open heart, lived with a greater degree of presence and intention and love. It is available to you. It has always been available to you. And it begins right now, in whatever moment you choose to truly show up for your own life. That moment can be this one. Stay awake, stay curious, stay kind to yourself most of all. The shift is not coming. The shift is happening. It is happening in you, through you, as you. And you, exactly as you are, exactly where you are, right now in this moment, are enough for everything that is trying to emerge.